Hey to everyone, and welcome back to One Up. It's Uther Ben Dragon, and in this series I provide you guys with a little bit of gameplay and my honest thoughts and opinions on games that I've played. Today we are going to be taking a look at Outriders. So right off the bat, let me tell you guys that I don't really like shooter games. Whether it be first person, third person, I just don't like it. And if I'm chilling to play a game, it wouldn't be my first game of choice. Even though my competitive game of choice is Apex Legends, which I post videos of that on my main channel. Link will be in the description if you know what I mean. But I made an exception for Outriders because after seeing the trailer, I was like, ooh, this game is kinda nice. But unfortunately for me, the game just wasn't it. So without further ado, let's get into it. So after a short and sweet character customization, the game takes place on an alien planet after our main protagonist, also known for being a part of a group of extinct elite soldiers, the Outriders, and a group of other people escape an apocalyptic event on Earth. The first thing that grabbed my attention were the PlayStation 3 like graphics, even though I am playing this on PlayStation 5. The environment wasn't too bad, but god, the character graphics were disturbing. It's like this guy had a set facial expression like he just smelled caca. Second thing were the controls. From the beginning of the game they felt a little off to me. The game did give you a relatively complex system to change your look and aim sensitivity. But regardless of how long I sat with it, I could never get it to feel good enough. After pushing through the game's tutorial area, you're sent to the game's first safe area. And the reason why I say first safe area is because the game has a great map progression. The world this game takes place on is relatively big, and you move around from area to area using a very customizable truck, which I notice is a part of this game's selling points. The game offers a great customization from weapons to clothes and even allowing you to change the way your character looks throughout the game, which is kind of cool knowing you weren't stuck with the character you created at the beginning of the game. So back to the world. The world design really looked good and in certain areas, and it kept this theme of alien-like planet most of the time. The game offered a good diversity of environments, from very lived-in town settlements to dense forest environments to well-designed desert and snow-like environments. But one thing that caught my attention was how quick you could progress through certain POIs. I literally spent no more than 15 to 30 minutes in each place, which to me wasn't good in terms of game development, but nonetheless they still looked good and allowed me to feel kinda immersed in the game. But this game is the bee's knees of invisible barriers. So 98% of the game is a follow the pathway type of thing, which left very little room for feeling of exploration or freedom, even though the game did try to portray being an open world. But don't be fooled by this, because this game had a ton of invisible barriers, which personally I think is very lazy design. You would find yourself stumbling upon an open door leading to a dark room, but would be stopped by a barrier, or a supposed pathway leading to a cool looking area but would be stopped by the same barrier. That really pulled my brief the wrong way, because if I can see the area, it should be accessible. Not to mention that every place that holds a point of interest or a combat area is blocked off by these cutscenes of you entering that area, which truly felt very PlayStation 2, because even though I knew that they made this a thing so that the game could load the next area, there's so many ways that you could do this that it was just better. So now that I've mentioned fighting, the combat of this game was really good and gory and was really just the meat of this game. Very early in the game, amidst a battle, you find out that the protagonist is an altered, which is basically a person that can have special abilities. Given that you're altered, the game allows you to choose between 4 power types, each of which being very cool and have their own perks and abilities. So personally I chose the Devastator, which is like this juggernaut in your face type of ability. The combat of this game was basically centered around the powers, even though it was a third person shooter, because the gunplay felt kind of mid-tier to me and really didn't do much to immerse me in battle. But the powers compensated for this and really did a solid in making the combat feel extremely fast paced and chaotic and all around just very exciting. The powers don't have much of a cooldown, so you'll find yourself in constant use of them, which did make you look and feel cool in game. So all these powers and even the character himself has a very in-depth skill tree that you can upgrade as you collect the required materials and skill points. Now even though they're kind of difficult to get, these upgrades do make a noticeable change in your favor, because the powers allow you a few different abilities which you can only access 3 at a time, And the three that I chose to me were the best, so I never really actually changed them throughout the game. But they really made combat feel great and immersive, and made every encounter with the enemies different depending on which abilities you chose. The combat can get a little difficult depending on the tier that you're on, which is basically like this game's difficulty setting. You can change your tier at any time throughout the game, and it's also kind of rewarding because the higher the tier you're on, the better the loot is that enemy is dropped. So the loot pool consisted mainly of really cool looking armor and guns, and majority of these armor and guns came pre-equipped with these reusable mods. And the mods were basically like adding a lightning bolt to your bullets or reloading after you rolled, and they really did add a ton of volume to the gameplay and combat and would really turn the tide of battle in your favor, especially later on in the game when things actually got better against the game's mini bosses and bosses. So a lot of these mini bosses and bosses are also just like you, and they're all kind of difficult in their own way. And the reason why I say kind of is because personally I didn't really struggle with them as much. Some of the alien-like bosses I fought with these big brutes, like over-exaggerating sci-fi looking creatures, and they did pose a certain challenge, but I ran through them relatively easy as well. And that was with my difficulty tier always being at its max setting. But what kind of irritated me about this game was that a lot of the bosses you fought were just copy and pasted bosses that you already fought. I would have preferred new bosses, but that honestly didn't put much of a dent in the combat because it was really solid. The mission setup wasn't too bad either. I didn't feel as if they were just time wasters, especially the side missions you got from NPCs. They were all eventful and purposeful in a mindless sort of way, especially in guiding you to specific uncharted areas or guiding you to a certain piece of information about the storyline. The game wasn't too big on its story, and majority of the time I was kind of confused as to what in the dog box was going on. But that was because the game mainly centered around just getting you from place to place to combat encounters. The NPCs of the game were really mid-tier. They didn't really offer much in terms of personality or interest, besides some uninteresting dialogue. But certain ones offered the side missions and also a place to purchase your gear and weapons, which I felt progressed too fast in terms of cost. As I said earlier on in the game, the gear and the weapons you get were basically the bread and butter of the combat. They really did change combat greatly, but at great costs. That majority of the time I just couldn't afford, or was too late to get it, because the items that were of any good had a time limit on them. But that was due to something that I noticed very early in the game, that the game felt very rushed in terms of development, and honestly felt like just a way to cash grab, which is rather disappointing given that the developers were Square Enix. I did expect way more from the game, but it was just really buggy and a lot of it felt like it was never tested before it was sent out. It truly was a game of many things, but a master of none. The game does have good replayability because you have 3 other powers to try out, but would I want to replay it? No. The game didn't really do much to make a good first impression. Most of it was really odd and chaotic. There was no rhyme or reason to the game. Most of it is just mindless fun. There's a lot of room for improvement that we'll hopefully see in the future, but for now, I'm gonna have to give this one a 3 out of 10. It really wasn't a very good game, especially for its price. And that, my friend, is going to bring us to the end of this video. My posting schedule is kind of shaky, so make sure to hit the bell notification and subscribe. So make sure that you're here for the next video. And with that being said, I'll see you there.